All right. Unit 8, Day 2, transformations. We're going to be changing M and B. We're going to talk about slope-intercept form. And if we change the M and change the B, how that actually affects the graph. So the first change I want to talk about here in Roman numeral 1 is changes in B. Now notice what you had there, y equals x. That's called the parent function. You guys would write that down with me. It's called the parent function because this is the parent of all the other functions. This is the very first function that ever was. Okay, and as we begin to make changes to this one, we create children. We create the other functions. Y equals x here has a starting point of 0 and a slope of 1. So we can come over here to our graph and we can actually graph this graph. So start at the origin. Oops. Okay. And do your best to graph that graph. Should look something like that. Okay. And then let's begin to make changes to this one. So in number 2 here, let's say we have y equals x plus 3. So if we had that one, you can see that the new b is going to be 3, but the slope is going to stay the same. Okay, let's graph that one. Okay. Now let's do another one. Let's say we have y equals x minus 5. So here our b will be negative 5, and our m will be 1. Okay, so we'll start at negative 5 and go from there. Okay, and there we go. Initially, some people might say, well, hey, look at these lines. Those are parallel lines. Those lines aren't ever going to cross. And you're absolutely right. Okay, we're going to talk about that in a moment. On the right column here, it talks about what is the same. Well, what's the same on all these guys is the slope. So the angles of the lines are the same. What changes is the b of the starting point. Okay, so as we look at number 2 here, as we go from the parent to y equals x plus 3, you can see that this guy has been shifted. And it's been shifted up 3. We can also say, kind of in fancy math speak, that this guy has been translated up 3. Okay? For the third one, y equals x minus 5, we could say that this one has been translated down 5, or shifted down 5. Okay? So, what's our conclusion here? Our conclusion is this. When you change B, when you change the starting point, you shift the graph up or down. Okay, but notice, the slope has not been changed. The angles of the lines have not been changed. One of the things I want you guys to write on here is this. These lines are parallel. So as you come up over here, write down parallel lines. Okay? If you have parallel lines, it means that they have the same same M, but different B. They have the same slope but a different starting point. Okay? Go to the second change. Let's say we start changing the M. Well, I'm going to have you guys start with the parent again, y equals x. So start at the origin, go up 1, right 1, graph that graph. And then let's, our first child here, let's make this one y equals 2x. Okay? So with y equals 2x, you can see that the b is 0. And the m is going to change. It's 2 over 1. Okay, so we're going to start at the origin just like with the parent, but now we're going to go up to right 1. Okay. Okay, like so. Okay. Let's do another line. Let's say we have y equals 1/2 x. Okay, b stays the same. M is 1/2. So up 1, right 2. All right, so what we get here. Okay. Okay, get that line there. Okay. So you can see here that a shift up and down has definitely not occurred. What has occurred is that these guys, the slope has been changed. The angles of the lines have been changed. Okay, so as we go over here, we say this. What's the same? Well, the same is B. What has changed is the M. Okay, the slope of the lines. So on the second one, as we go from the parent, the original graph, to the new one, the y equals 2x, you can see that this line has been made steeper. So as you go from a slope of 1 to 2, it's going to definitely be steeper. Matter of fact, you can even say, you can go so far as to say it's going to be twice as steep, twice as steep. Okay, well, the third one, as we go from the parent to the y equals 1/2 x, you can see visually here that this one's going to be less steep or flatter. You're going to hear me talk about the absolute value of these slopes. What the absolute value is basically how far a number is from 0. If the absolute value of a slope is less than another one, that's going to be steeper. In other words, if that number is closer to 0, you're going to get a flatter line. Okay? Conclusion. When you change m, you make the graph more or less steep. More or less steep. Okay? All right, last change. It says negative slope, and I'm going to cross out negative. You guys will do that with me as well. Could y'all write opposite slope? Because what's going to happen here, the third different kind of change is we're going to be changing the sign of m. So whatever it is, positive or negative, it's going to be changed to the other sign. The first equation I want you guys to start with here is y equals x plus 3. Now, this is not the parent. It is a child, but it is the line I want you guys to start with nonetheless. Okay, so we'll start with that one. Now, let's say that I take this child and make a new child from it. And I do this by changing the sign of its slope from positive 1 to negative 1. So this guy's going to start at the same place, but it's going to have a different slope, down 1, right 1. Okay, so boom, 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 boom. Okay. Well, initially, you guys, as we're making this line, y'all might say, well, hey, we just made an X. And you're right, we did make an X. But more than that's what's going on here. Okay? So let's fill in our right column. What we did here is we changed the sign of m. Changed the sign of m. And we went from 1 to negative 1. But we could also go from negative 1 to 1. We're just changing either from a positive to a negative or a negative to a positive. Okay? Well, what did that do? Well, as we went from the original child to the new child, yes, we made an X, but what really happened here is we flipped it. We flipped the graph. And we flipped it over the y-axis. Okay? Another way to say this, you might have heard this in previous years, is that we reflected it. Okay? So put reflection over y-axis. Okay? Reflection over the y-axis. And you can see if you start with that original red graph, and you're able to twist the graph, maybe by grabbing the y-axis and turning it 180 degrees, what you would get after you twist it is that new blue line. So if it turned around that way, you basically just flipped it over the y-axis. Okay? So conclusion. When you change the sign of m, you flip the line over the y-axis. Okay? When you change the sign of m, you flip the line over the y-axis. Okay? All right, lastly, I want you guys to do some comparisons here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start throwing all three of these changes together. So remember, if you change the b, you can shift the line up or down. If you change the m, you can make the line more or less steep. If you change the sign of m, then you flip the line over the y-axis. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have you guys start with the parent here, the y equals x. And I'm going to give you guys some new equations. So let's say I have y equals 3x plus 2. I want you guys to just be able to look at the equations and tell me whether those three changes above have occurred. And let me show you how to do that. The first thing you do is you look at the b. Well, the b on the parent is 0. The b on this new one is 2. So obviously there's a change there. This graph has been shifted up 2. Okay? Then look at the slope. The original slope was 1. This slope is now 3. Well, that's obviously greater. This graph is going to be steeper. Matter of fact, it's even 3 times as steep. Okay, lastly, take a look at the signs of the slope. The parent was 1, positive 1. This new child is positive 3. There's not a change in sign there. So this guy has not flipped over the y-axis. These are the only two changes that have occurred. Let's try another one. Y equals negative 1/2 x minus 3. Okay, let's take a look at the b. The original b was 0. This b is negative 3. A shift has occurred. In this case, it's been shifted down 3. Okay, from 0 to negative 3. Then take a look at the slope. This slope is negative 1/2. Originally it was 1, so there is a change there. Now you got to figure out which one is going to be steeper or less steep. Okay, well, think about the absolute values, how far those numbers are away from 0. 1 is 1 away from 0. Negative 1/2 is a half away from 0. So negative 1/2 actually has a less absolute value. Therefore, it's going to be less steep. So the closer you are to 0, the less steep your line is. Okay. Lastly, positive 1 to a negative 1/2, that sign has been changed. This graph will also be flipped over the y-axis. So all 3 changes have occurred on that one. Okay. Let's try a different little family here. I'm not going to start with the parent. I'm going to start with the child, y equals 2x plus 4. And I'm going to give you 3 different equations here that it's going to go to. And I want you guys to pause the video here in a second. And I want you to think about those 3 changes and whether or not those 3 changes have occurred going from this child to the new children. Okay, pause the video, and then when you unpause it, we'll see what we got. Okay, on the first one here, going from a B of 4 to a new B of 1, that's a shift down of 3. Okay, going from a slope of 2 to a slope of 2 means that there's no change there. It's not going to be more steep or less steep. They're going to have the same steepness. Also notice that they're both positive, so a sign didn't change. So what that means is the only change that occurred here was a shifted down of 3. These 2 lines have different B's, but the same M. They're going to be parallel lines. Okay? Second one here. Take a look at the B. It went from 4 to 0. Well, that means it's going to be shifted down 4. Okay? Next, take a look at the slope. It's at 1/2. So from 2 to 1/2, 1/2 is a smaller or less absolute value. It's closer to 0. Therefore, it's going to be less steep. Okay? Next, take a look at the signs. They're both positive. Therefore, there hasn't been a flip over the y-axis. The only 2 changes that have occurred are the ones that are listed there. All right, last one. The B is the same, from 4 to 4. No change occurred there. The slope goes from 2 to negative 2. All right, let's first think about more or less steep. The absolute value of 2 and negative 2 is the same. They're both the same distance away from 0. Therefore, these are both going to have the same steepness, even though they may be going in different directions. What has changed here is the sign. So they go from positive to negative here. The only change that occurred in this last one is it's been flipped over the y-axis. Okay. Be prepared to talk about these 3 changes when you guys see me in class next time. Also, remember to do the 8 homework problems over graphing linear inequalities on the other side. And then remember there will also be a quiz over both the next time I see you. All right. Thank you very much.